Jason, and welcome everybody to using a financial analysis framework to drive both security first and cloud smart. My name is, Jason said, Stephen Kaplan, Vice President of Customer Success Finance Nutanix, though better known on Twitter as ROI Dude. Over the years, I've been very fortunate to co-author, along with senior technical architects, 5 books on Citrix and 3 on VMware. I wrote the business parts. My co-authors all told me I wrote the easy parts. Well, in 2019, I came off my first solo book, The ROI Story, a guide for IT leaders. And the book is geared toward helping IT professionals utilize a financial analysis framework, not only to evaluate disruptive technologies, but for the ones that make sense, then how do you build a compelling business case to gain consensus, to gain the monies you actually need to deploy the technology? And Mark Templeton, the longtime CEO of Citrix, graciously wrote the foreword. Jason, let's go to the first polling question.
And yes, just so everybody is aware, we are going to be running some polls in this session, folks, so please participate when prompted. Poll number 1 is all around funds for an IT initiative in progress. So when you need funds for an IT initiative, what do you require? Nothing, my request is good enough. A detailed internal ROI or TCO analysis, an external or externally vetted financial analysis, or finance never approves our IT projects. It's always a fun one, Steve. We'll let this run for another 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Fantastic. And then let's just share those results. See you there, Steve. Can you see those?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic.
All right,
So,
great. Well,
option 2.
What's that?
Option 2 coming out trumps here.
Yes, which is great to see. Detailed internal ROI or TCO analysis. And I encourage people and encourage in the book, even if you do have project approval, we have go ahead and so on, I still always recommend doing a detailed financial analysis. It pays off in spades. Over a period of 20 years, I started, ran, ultimately sold to award-winning channel partner businesses, the first focus on Citrix, the second on VMware. And rather than use conventional sales methodologies, we would use ROI TCO to help our customers evaluate disruptive technologies like Citrix, like VMware. I considered Cisco UCS to be disruptive back in its day. In fact, what you're looking at is the fall 2012 edition of Cisco's magazine. The cover story, Getting Real with ROI, was about the financial analysis work I did for Concentra Healthcare, headquartered in Dallas. And that's me in the middle of the picture, speaking with Concentra's very savvy CIO, Suzanne Kosu. Suzanne told me, Steve, for years, we've been struggling to get the money we need to expand our small virtualization environment, but the most we can get is $15,000 to $20,000 at a time, not enough to even make a dent. I worked with Suzanne's staff to put together a comprehensive ROI analysis that I thought had great results, but Suzanne told me, Steve, we're owned by a private equity company with extremely stringent financial controls. We need more. When Suzanne and I presented the results to senior management and a couple of board members, of course, we went over the numbers. But what we emphasized was painting this picture of this big national company that was reliant on a single backup generator. And the air conditioning was a total mess, needed almost $1 million overhaul. But with the hot Dallas summer months approaching and ever increasing demand for more servers, there was still a good probability of downtime, which would, of course, been devastating to the business. And if Suzanne were here, I think she'd tell you something like, that was an amazing meeting. After years of struggling to get monies in drips and drabs, we essentially got the verbal buy-up on the spot we needed for the millions of dollars to virtualize our entire data center. Shortly after selling my second company, I moved up to Lake Tahoe, where I envisioned this nice, cushy consulting career. Just after moving up, a friend of mine of VMware VCDX gave me a call. Hey, Steve, I joined this hot startup in the infrastructure space. I think you could be a good fit. Come interview. Now, I wasn't looking to go to work for anybody. I just moved up to Tahoe. But I met with the startup and I was very impressed with the people. And I was blown away when they showed me their technology. What they've done is they've taken the same type of web scale architecture pioneered by Google in the cloud space and now used by all the leading cloud providers. And they brought it to the enterprise, letting customers run even the most demanding of applications on software distributed file system running on commodity servers, aggregating the local storage, the disk and the flash of the servers. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, if this works as advertised, this is going to change the entire IT industry as we know it. But then I immediately started second guessing myself. How often does a tiny little 50-person startup have a prayer against the handful of multi-billion-dollar giants that completely dominate not just the data center, but as I knew full too well from my decades as a channel partner, the entire reseller channel, which wields a lot of influence. So I didn't join, but as I watched Nutanix's explosive growth over the next year, I became increasingly convinced that they had a good chance of pulling off one of the business upsets of the decade, and I knew that I had to be a part of that. So I gave up my dream of a cushy consultant career, went back to work 70 hours a week at a startup. And that was over 8 years ago now. But it's been this incredible opportunity to participate as Nutanix unquestionably has changed the industry. The technology it pioneered in the enterprise became known eventually as hyper-converged infrastructure, or HCI for short. And HCI is certainly mainstream. IDC says that the HCI revenues last year were 8.4 billion, and they project them at almost 13 billion in 3 years. And Nutanix long ago went public and joined the billion-dollar ranks itself. When I started at Nutanix, this was our marketing, the no sand symbol. And back then, every leading data center manufacturer scoffed at this notion of running serious applications on software on commodity servers instead of on these big proprietary SANs. Of course, today, they all offer their own HCI solutions. And a December 2020 article in SiliconANGLE states, the days of selling storage controllers that mask the deficiencies of spinning disk or add embedded hardware functions, those days are gone. And even VMware, which is still 85% owned by Dell EMC, tweeted January 4th of this year, it's nearly impossible to satisfy real-time business needs with traditional 3-tier infrastructure. And by 3-tier, we mean centralized storage network, and servers. After starting at Nutanix, I was fascinated to learn about the company's security roots. Back when it was still very tiny, its first customer was the US government, a very large customer, and say, hey, we love your stuff, but run it on the DoD networks, you need to get all these certs. So Nutanix was faced with this decision. Do we follow the path of almost every other startup and grow first, get more money, get more customers, and then kind of go back and bolt on security? Or do we make this massive investment in retooling and labs and consultants? And they decided to go for it and basically bake security into the DNA. And during the process, I realized that it could take these pages and pages of hardening guides typical for IT infrastructure and automate all that. And that would not only save a lot of time and effort, but also eliminate the human mistakes commonly for trying to manually input those hardening guides. And then they realized that they could have the system itself detect changes. Like, for example, if an administrator leaves a root password open or changes an SSH configuration, the system detects it and restores it to its baseline version. So Nutanix HCI, not only makes data centers vastly more efficient, but it also now serves as the basis for both private clouds and multi-cloud. Eric Shepard, the Vice President of Research for IDC, said last year that hyper-converged systems are becoming the backbone of the multi-cloud world. Nutanix recently issued its 3rd annual Enterprise Cloud Index, or ECI for short, and this is a report compiled by the research organization Vance and Bourne, who surveyed 3,400 IT decision makers from across the globe, and 82% of the public sector ECI respondents said the hybrid cloud is their ideal operating model. And 52% of the respondents said that they plan to use multiple public clouds within 12 months. And by the way, a very interesting stat from that report, 70% of the public sector respondents reported that the pandemic has caused IT to be viewed more strategically within their organizations, something, of course, that CIOs have long sought, and I've been a big advocate of over the years. Unfortunately, this is not likely the case for organizations that still run traditional SAN-based data centers. In my ROI book, I make the case that the legacy data center model, the SAN-based data center 3-tier model, is broken. And I give a lot of examples supporting this assertion. This is my favorite. This is a tweet by Mustafa Kali, who authored the book Storage Design and Implementation in vSphere 6. And he bragged that he fit all 1,242 pages in one volume. I mean, 1,242 pages. This is a big, thick, heavy book. Now, in contrast, the Nutanix equivalent to storage design and implementation in vSphere, because even though we compete with vSphere, we're also partners with vSphere. Just under half of our customers still run vSphere, and we put a lot of effort in it. We like to say actually Nutanix is the best platform for running vSphere. So our equivalent to this 1,242-page book is a 22-page tech note. And the 1,220-page delta, it represents the complexity of three-tier SAN-based architecture. And of course, this complexity equals cost because you now have to manage more pieces, you have to put in more effort, you need specialized skill sets in administrating the SANs and the storage networks, and also more moving parts mean less reliability and more security vulnerability. Key for nearly all organizations is both automation and innovation. But how do you know which new technology to deploy, if any? I found that over the years that an informal process for evaluating disruptive technology often doesn't work well due to several factors. One of them being something called personal agenda. For example, maybe an IT administrator is getting retired in 2 or 3 years, and maybe he doesn't want to have to learn about a new technology and how to deploy it. Or someone else perhaps has years of relationships she's established with legacy vendors that she highly values. Or maybe someone else has built her career around legacy certifications she's achieved. She doesn't want to see these go away. So when you have this type of personal agenda, it makes it difficult for unbiased results from the evaluation process to get to the decision makers. And I believe this is certainly the minority of cases, that most IT professionals are generally curious about new technology. They want to learn about it. If it makes sense, they want to bring it into their data center, even if it's at their own discomfort. But even in these cases, they're subject to what we call confirmation bias, which is the tendency in this example to look at new technologies through the status quo lens of what we know. And just one example, Nutanix pioneered HCI almost 10 years ago. It's industry standard. And yet we still commonly get the question when we're doing an analysis, what is your cost per gigabyte or per terabyte? Because that's how we measure storage. And it's a great metric if you're going to buy, I don't know why anybody would today, but if you're going to buy a new SAN or NAS, but it makes absolutely no sense in a hyper-converged world. As another example of status quo bias, consider the whole virtualization lifecycle. When I started my VMware consultancy in early 2005, VMware was already mainstream, was used across the globe. vMotion had been out for almost a year, but still the biggest objection we would get from IT professionals, you will never put my production server into a virtual machine. Now we laugh about that today, right? And yet Gartner, who's in the business of projecting IT trends, saw what was happening with this transformation of virtualization in the cloud space years ago. And over 4 years ago now, they retired their magic quadrant for virtualization. And today, every leading public cloud provider and hybrid cloud facilitator, and I'll include Nutanix in that, while we all support legacy commercial standalone hypervisors, for our own customers, we all offer native Linux-based hypervisors. In fact, all but Azure, Microsoft, we all offer KVM-based hypervisors. And these are so much simpler. There's no separate management tier that you have to buy and set up and configure and figure out how to secure and how to make redundant and how to scale. There's no certifications required, certainly nowhere anywhere near the scale of legacy hypervisors. They're resilient, they're scalable, they're just there. So going through a formal financial analysis process, as I described in my book, is a great way to shed spotlight on confirmation bias, on status quo bias, so that the decision makers receive as objective results as possible in order to make the best technology choice for their organization. There's an IDG report that says that 49% of organizations in public cloud are struggling with managing security. Of course, the leading cloud providers invest heavily in their security, but they're not responsible for your own internal policies and processes. And these differ greatly on public cloud native versus on-prem. In fact, anytime you have to do something manual on either the private or the public side is a disaster waiting to happen. Public cloud also has a much broader attack vector where simple mistakes can sometimes be catastrophic. Capital One's 100 million record breach, for example, all stemmed from a misconfigured server. Now, Nutanix customers do not compromise by running AHV instead of a standalone hypervisor. The past 12 months of reviews in Gartner server virtualization reviews and ratings ranks AHV as the highest rated hypervisor, 4.9 out of 5 stars of all the leading virtualization platforms reviewed. And the recent Enterprise Networking Planet issue, Best Server Virtualization Software of 2021, includes a glowing review of Nutanix HV, saying Nutanix HV aims to simplify the world of server virtualization. It does away with a model that views virtualization as a complex layer of the IT stack that is licensed, deployed, and managed separately. Instead, Nutanix HV offers a secure, enterprise-grade virtualization solution that can provision and optimize VMs and containers, monitor infrastructure and application performance, scale your environment, and automate mundane IT operations. Jason, let's hit poll number 2, please.
Okay, folks, second poll of the session. How virtualized is your organization? How virtualized is your organization? 100% of x86 servers that can be virtualized are. We're 80 to 100% virtualized, or we have a long way to go. It's pretty interactive votes coming into this one. So we'll leave this for another 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, Steve, here are your results.
So 61%, 80 to 100% virtualized. That's pretty typical out there. 13% still got a long way to go. Only 26% are 100% virtualized. So that's good. Those are good results. What Nutanix allows is pretty unique because with Nutanix AHV, if you decide to go that way instead of a standalone hypervisor, you don't need a SAN, you don't need a storage administrator, you don't need a storage network, you don't need virtualization software, you don't need a virtualization administrator. Convert to virtual machines and go. San Mateo County, we did a TCO, or actually this is an ROI analysis for them back in 2014 about virtualizing their 550 physical servers. Projected savings were 11.5 million, 3.5-month payback. They just about exactly hit that and have had phenomenal results. This was a TCO analysis we did for Dallas County. In this case, we're comparing Nutanix HCI versus legacy 3-tier. And this is one of the ways we like to show the data on a snapshot 5-year basis, broken out by category, and then by CapEx and OpEx. And in this case, you can see that Dallas County saved almost 2.5 million, just about 48% going with HCI. One of Nutanix's great higher ed customers, Texas A&M University, encapsulates the cost savings from HCI, enabling IT modernization and optimization. Texas A&M also utilizes Nutanix HV. Kerry Teichert, who's quoted here, said of their former virtualization solution, the complexity and the amount of work it took to keep that environment running was becoming a drain on our IT team. Prior to implementing Nutanix, the city of Berkeley had a traditional 3-tier infrastructure that was difficult to scale and unreliable. The legacy infrastructure was complex to troubleshoot, sometimes resulting in long-lasting outages, during which the city's department had to rely on pen and paper. Savita Chaudhary, director of IT, City of Berkeley, said, with Nutanix, we've been able to adapt during these unprecedented times while continuing to provide the highest level of service to our community. City of Plano moved from its legacy data center infrastructure environment to HCI in 2017. Before making the purchase decision, they conducted an extensive TCO study. Actually, this wasn't with my team. They did it on their own. They projected savings of 3.5 million. Chris Edwards, enterprise architect, said that Nutanix is enabling us to serve our citizens in a more efficient way, and it makes our IT team more productive. Public sector organizations have historically grappled with regulations that deter telework. 48% of global public sector ECS respondents said that their organizations had no employees working remotely a year ago. I doubt that's true today. In fact, the survey said that today only 15% of respondents report zero remote workers. But work from anywhere poses a raft of new security issues since organizations are essentially extending their networks into someone's home, enabling an infected device to spread to the network. IT also loses the network traffic visibility for remote users. I like VDI and also desktop as a service solutions to mitigate these issues, and you give users a brand new, fresh virtual desktop every time they log in, at least if you set it up that way. And Nutanix HCI makes VDI dramatically easier and far more affordable, since organizations can now start with a small number of users and then expand as quickly or as slowly as they'd like, maintaining perfect linear performance, whether at 300 users, 3,000 users, or 30,000 users. And unlike a SAN, HCI users never have to go through painful upgrades or inconsistent user performance as their SAN storage controls reach capacity. And as you can see, total projected 5-year savings for this healthcare customer, we did a fairly small 1,100 concurrent users, growing very fast. Projected 5-year savings, 2.4 million, 10.2-month payback. And this is very typical, again, because of the pay-as-you-grow capability. Nutanix customers can almost always pay for the whole VDI deployment just by upgrading in conjunction with their PC and laptop refresh rate, so the budget pays for the whole deployment. And while not reflected in this summary sheet, our analysis, we always do dive into other variables and into the narrative. We talk about all the security savings this healthcare organization got, for example, and we look at employee productivity benefits. In this case, we drill down into physician productivity, and we found that the going to VDI, Citrix in this case, on Nutanix, the average physician was able to slash their login times, to eliminate round trips to CPOE billing stations and so on. In fact, they saved enough time to, on average, see 1 extra patient a day. Well, you take that revenue per patient, multiply it by all the physicians, by all the days in 5 years, and that comes to 120 million in projected increased revenues. So you add that on top of the already impressive 2.4 million in infrastructure savings, and you get a very compelling case. Public cloud, of course, has this tremendous momentum. AWS alone is on a $50 billion run rate. You take the momentum of public cloud and combine it with the deep frustration of SAN-based infrastructure, the complexity, the inflexibility, the high cost, and you get this pressure for organizations of all sizes to lift and shift to public cloud. During my frequent talks with organizations across the globe, I often hear, many times proudly, we have a cloud-first policy. Well, as an analyst, I like to take a step back and evaluate people's strategic decision-making. So my response to everybody making this leap is simply why? What type of research and analysis went into making this choice? And I'll hear answers such as the CIO told us to do it, or the board thinks it'd be a good idea, or probably the most common one, we want to save money. But rarely are these reasonings backed by data or by critical thinking about the best cloud smart choice for the organizations. And it turns out that public cloud is expensive, at least for predictable workloads, which just so happen to make up the majority of workloads for most organizations. It's the whole rent versus buy thing. If you're going to rent a car, if you're going to use a car just a few weeks out of the year, it makes way more sense to rent it than to buy it. But if you can use it all the time, it's much more economical to buy it. The exact same thing is true of public cloud. Put your predictable workloads in on-premises, put your elastic burstable workloads in public cloud. The Flexera 2020 State of the Cloud report says that 82% of organizations struggle with managing cloud spend and are over budget by an average of 23%. November 2020, McKinsey report backs these numbers. The IDG State of IT Modernization 2020 report that you're looking at says that 7 in 10 organizations have experienced higher than expected cloud costs. And in addition to managing cloud spend, public cloud native has all these other challenges as well. I talked a little bit about security challenges earlier. There's also performance and resiliency challenges. You know, you're sharing the same network with other organizations. You can get noisy neighbor. In order to, you know, all the leading cloud providers have and continue to have some downtime. Trying to mitigate that, spanning multiple zones, is very, very expensive. Organizations tend to dramatically underestimate the cost and time of migrating to public cloud, while overestimating the viability of actually getting there, of migrating all your workloads, something that not many mid-sized or larger organizations accomplish. And even if possible, it typically takes years, and until that last workload leaves the data center, you're paying for both environments, the high rent public cloud and the on-prem environment, and the staff to manage both environments. I wrote an article for Forbes last year about using a formal financial analysis framework to not only help mitigate status quo and confirmation bias, but also to help alleviate all this pressure to lift and shift to public cloud. Instead, the analysis can begin gathering the data required to plan an optimal cloud smart strategy, putting the right workload in the right cloud, whether that's on-prem private, public, or in multi-cloud. The foundation for Nutanix's hybrid cloud strategy is Nutanix clusters, which is our HCI called Nutanix AOS, ported to public cloud running in bare metal. And because clusters let you operate the same way in on-prem as in public cloud, it mitigates all these challenges that I just talked about. It lets you use the same tool sets, the skill sets, the same operating models, same IT governance, even the same security policies on both on-prem and public cloud. Clusters is FedAmp authorized, and it works on AWS GovCloud. And for almost all workloads, clusters actually reduces the cost of public cloud native. I'm not going to go into the reasons why. We have a detailed white paper I'm very happy to send you, but just a very high level, you know, if clusters reduces the public cloud inefficiencies like t-shirt size instances where you have leftover resources and limitations on vCPU over subscription and storage inefficiencies and inability to automatically turn down VMs that aren't being used and then spin them up again. So clusters mitigates all these inefficiencies. And what happens is that Nutanix clusters running in public cloud for almost all workloads actually reduces your cost of public cloud native, as unintuitive as that sounds. This is a analysis we did for a county, and we gave them 5 scenarios. On the far left was running in the 3-tier. Next to that was Nutanix on-prem, then the 2 public cloud scenarios, and then clusters of public cloud. And by the way, we're not stratifying workloads here. We're just mixture of predictable and elastic workloads. And in this case, the Nutanix on clusters was a little bit more expensive than the 3-tier. In many cases, it'll be less. It was quite a bit more than the on-prem, but it was millions of dollars less than the public cloud native solutions. And that doesn't even include application replatforming and refactoring, something that often takes a lot of money and time. I had a team of business value analysts who help customers quantify not only ROI and TCO from running Nutanix, AOS, and cluster, but also our portfolio products such as Era, Coun, and Flow, and many others that help ensure a robust hybrid cloud environment. For example, University of Reading's deployment of Nutanix files resulted in them saving about 700 terabytes of data, obviously leading to significant cost savings. Nutanix's award-winning CIO, Wendy Pfeiffer, says that when relax about the technology and focus on the business. And whenever possible, my team tries to uncover business objectives and then map those back to IT initiatives and ultimately back to disruptive technology. Example, USC Marshall School of Business, the Nutanix solution cut the team's energy consumption by 50%, which then helped them align with the university's priority to help the planet with green initiatives. Jason, last poll, please.
There you go, audience, your final poll. How aligned is IT with the business? How aligned is IT with the business? This topic which goes on and on and on. We work in lockstep all the time. We periodically interact to ensure IT is working in the same direction, but we're still waiting to get introduced to the business. Good results so far. No one's saying they're still waiting to be introduced. That's good. Just another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, some last minute votes there. Okay, and here you go, Steve.
That's great. So yeah, 100% are working at least part-time to ensure working in the same direction. Back to San Mateo County, in terms of working with the business, they act like an IT, like a service provider to the cities and agencies. And Shanta Carr, Assistant CIO, said about Nutanix, the biggest proof is in the pudding. More and more customers want to be in our environment. Agencies and cities hear about our high performance and zero downtime, and they want to join the party. And with that, let's go ahead and open it up for questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Steve. Well, I'll leave Steve's email up there, obviously, for a little bit, and his name, Twitter name, ROI Dude. And let's, so people can just make a note of that, and let's dive into some of these questions that have been coming in. So first question that comes across, in your opinion, should budget not be a constraint for investing in HCI?
I think a budget should be a constraint for investing in anything in IT. But the important thing is to do an analysis, and not just an upfront analysis, say, what's the cost of a SAN compared to cost of HCI, but say, do the analysis, how is each scenario going to affect us over 5 years? And not only in terms of the budget spent, but in terms of IT staff productivity, in terms of achieving organizational objectives, and so on.
Right. Is Nutanix HIPAA compliant?
I don't want to answer that because I don't know for sure. I'm almost sure the answer is yes, but I'll get somebody who knows the answer to weigh in on that for sure.
Thank you very much. What sort of network is too small for you to support? To be specific, could you support a 3-location medical practice with 130 users and still growing?
Yeah, absolutely. We, Nutanix started out, other than the U.S. government, a lot of the customers originally were small and grew into very large enterprises. And still today, the technology makes all kinds of economic sense, even at 130 users. Again, it's so much different because in a SAN world, you have to buy this big old SAN. With Nutanix, you start with 3 nodes. You can start with a few 3 nodes and then just grow as quickly or slowly as you want. So it makes it very economically compelling, even for small organizations.
Great. A little comment just came into the chat here. We usually do multiple year renewal contracts. In your opinion, what is a good time frame to lock into?
The world is moving to a subscription basis, and the same thing with Nutanix. So I think it all depends a lot on your budget and your chief financial officer's objectives, and if they're looking to capitalize or expense the cost and all those types of things. From a financial analysis perspective, we like 5-year period, and that's because typically that tends to be the actual life of IT infrastructure. But we do get requests for 3 years, we get requests for 7 years, and we modify them, but 5 years is typically the sweet spot.
Great, thank you. And just to follow on from the previous question, Sylvia just mentions we need to talk. I'm at crossroads for that medical practice and need to do cloud soon, but it needs to be HIPAA compliant. So waiting for that answer when you get it.
I'm almost sure. I'm 98% sure it's yes. I just want to make absolutely 100% sure.
It's like being in the seat on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Well, let me put it this way.
I know the answer.
Let me put it this way. We have a vast number. I think healthcare is our 2nd largest vertical across the world, and all kinds of very large healthcare organizations and small healthcare organizations. So I just can't imagine that it would be HIPAA compliant.
Of course, thank you. What are some of the ways organizations can identify different workload types in their environment? What are some of the ways organizations can identify different workload types in their environment?
We have some tools that will actually help with that, built into kind of our software, and you can also use other tools like RB Tools is out there that you can use for free typically, and you can then see what type of workloads do you have. Are they elastic or are they predictable? And then that'll help you in determining where they should go. And you want to continue to monitor them over time because characteristics of workloads do change, and maybe a workload that you optimize for public cloud runs great there, it becomes predictable. And now you're going to be able to run it for a third or a fourth of the cost back on-prem on Nutanix. And then you can use, the great thing about clusters is it's the same licensing on-prem as in public cloud. So you can use the same licensing and just move back on-prem or vice versa.
Gotcha. Brilliant. Thank you. Are there important ROI elements that are often overlooked or undervalued by the average IT CIO?
Well, the biggest one is not doing an analysis at all. And sometimes that's very intentional. I won't tell you who, but that was probably a year and a half ago, we were working with the county, and they had a new CIO who had a mandate to go to public cloud. And so we offered to do a free TCO analysis so he'd get more information. But he didn't even want us to do the analysis. He didn't want the numbers. He's so set on this objective that that's all he cared about. So that's the number one thing is doing an analysis. In terms of things that are often overlooked, I would say administrative savings. Some organizations say, especially, public sector, hey, these folks are unionized, they're on our payroll. It doesn't matter if they're actually working or not. And I think that's kind of short-sighted that, well, first of all, most IT staffs, especially public sector, are dramatically overworked anyway, if they're running legacy 3-tier. And so showing that, by saving them tons of time, they can now do things that are productive for the organization. Again, going back to San Mateo County, Eric Larson, head of IT infrastructure, in my book, I include some quotes by him talking about how great it is that the IT staff there, when they went to Nutanix, they don't have to work weekends anymore and nights anymore doing these upgrades and all this troubleshooting. He said life before was misery. Now they have fewer people through attrition, but they get to do all these more fun things that are more rewarding for them personally, better for their career, and better for the organization. So I would say that's the biggest one is IT admin savings.
Interesting. Questions coming on the chat again. Could you compare internal resource requirements, compare Nutanix versus public cloud? So I'm assuming, can you compare internal resource requirements for Nutanix versus public cloud?
Well, of course, you need the hardware, the servers, and the data center, on-prem, the power and the cooling and so on, things like that you don't need in public cloud. On the other hand, public cloud, you need connectivity to it. You're paying to rent all those same type of features. From an administration standpoint, if you're running Nutanix clusters in public cloud, again, which is a no-lose situation, right? Because you lower your cost of public cloud native, you get there much faster, and you get the same operating model. So if you're running that, there's really no difference in terms of IT resources. Maybe you got to have someone that understands public cloud networking, but that could probably be your internal folks. If you're not, if you're running public cloud native versus on-prem, then it's a whole different ball of wax. I was speaking with a county head of cloud, chief of cloud, who had been brought in to get the county to facilitate the county's mandate to move to AWS. And he had a whole cloud native background. He had patents for stuff running in public cloud he developed. And so when I got a meeting with him, because the CIO told him to meet with me, his first reaction, 20 minutes, and during the start of the meeting was like, why am I talking to Nutanix? I'm all about public cloud. But by the end of that 20-minute conversation, he said, we want a clusters POC. We want it now. We want to partner with you on this. And the reason why wasn't because of the cost savings. He didn't really care about that. The reason why was because they're unionized, he was not allowed to send his staff to get the extra training they would need to efficiently and safely operate the public cloud. And even if he could, he wouldn't have the budget to backfill them because you need more staff. So when he realized that Nutanix clusters would allow him to migrate to public cloud so much faster without hiring any more people, that's when he got so enthusiastic about it.
Nice. Questions keep coming. Suggestions to manage the complexity of a cloud private, Nutanix and public with 3-tier on-prem equipment. What about operation costs for Nutanix?
Well, Nutanix is vastly less expensive to manage than 3-tier, because you don't need a dedicated SAN administrator. You don't have to worry about the storage network and LUN carving and zone switching and RAID group management and volumes expansion. 100% of all your storage administration tasks go away. So you don't have to worry about any of that. In terms of managing 3-tier, Nutanix isn't going to really help you there. You can continue to run it in parallel. It doesn't hurt anything, but you're just not going to get all the administrative savings you do for Nutanix. The good news is it's not a rip or replace. You know, if you just bought a SAN and politically it's just not feasible to jettison that thing, run it. And then you can still run Nutanix. And if you're running legacy hypervisor like VMware, we can even let you run basics of vCenter through Nutanix. So you can do all that, and then you can use Nutanix in public cloud. So, you know, you start getting the savings right away, start reducing the complexity of your environment. And when you're ready, you know, move completely to a software-defined HCI world.
Hopefully that answered your question. And the final one, we do have time for one more, and it is the final question we have. Can Nutanix support data access only in a case where no VDI or application support is needed?
I'm trying to think of what this means. Support data access.
Can Nutanix support data access only in a case where no VDI or application support is needed?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't quite understand that. With Nutanix, you know, every node you have data on, that's part of running on typically on flash, sometime on disk, and it's all aggregated to look like one big storage module through the software. So it doesn't matter whether you're VDI or server or, you know, any type of workload database. We're going to aggregate that and make it very simple to access that data, regardless of any use case. And Nutanix is used for the most demanding use cases in the world. You know, SAP for healthcare customers. You know, Epic, Elastic, all these Elasticsearch, all these massive workloads run phenomenally well in Nutanix, and we have lots of statements from customers, public sector and otherwise, that their performance improves once they go to Nutanix and get away from the SAN.
Fantastic. Well, that brings a close to your session. I'm going to suggest Sylvia jump into the round table next. Steve is going to be there moderating, and he'll be able to help answer that question a little bit better as well, and open this conversation up a little bit further. That does bring a close to our first session of the day. So I'd like to obviously, again, encourage the audience to join me in a virtual round of applause for Mr. Steve Kaplan. Really appreciate the insights there.